Call this meeting to order. If you'll join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all for coming to our December meeting, and we'll go ahead and start. Number 3 item on the agenda is approval of the agenda.
I move that we accept the agenda.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
So moved. Moving right along, number 4 is the consent agenda. For those of you with agendas, you can look and see the A through K, different items that we're approving on that.
I had a question or a comment. I think we're like approving travel here.
Mm-hmm.
And I just it would make sense that we approve it before it actually happens. I think drama was last week.
Yes,
So if we can just go forward, I guess that makes sure everybody's
it is supposed to be done prior to. And that, it was in-state, so there's different rules for in-state and out-of-state, but yes.
I mean, I don't think anybody's dying over it. I just thought if we're just.
You are spot on, Mr. Adams. Thank you.
Anything else?
Any questions? Entertain a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
So moved. Moving right into number 5, reports. 5A, superintendent report. Dr. Reber?
Thank you. I wanted to give a shout out to the high school. This is Giving Week at the high school, and I have seen all that they have going on, and I'm going to look at the high school faces out there. It seems like a pretty good week this week. Am I correct? Yeah. I don't see your dress up days today, though, but the rest of the week we'll see that. The other thing, let's see, on Thursday of this week, Region 3 superintendents have a meeting with all legislators in this region from this area to talk about the upcoming legislative session. We're still waiting on the governor to announce his task force recommendations. That has not officially come out yet, but I do know, I've heard through the grapevine, that literacy is going to still be a big component of conversations. This past week, we worked with the State Insurance Fund to do training with the directors as well as maintenance and food service on workman's comp. They were talking to us about how to be safe, not like standing on a chair to change a light bulb or to hang a picture or things like that. And so in January, we'll also be doing that training with principals who can then in turn talk to their teachers about safety in the classrooms, about cords across the floor, that type of thing. I wanted to give a shout out to Amy Hicks and the high school orchestra. Many of you saw them here and heard them here tonight. They did a most excellent job, and Amy and I chatted that they'll come back in the springtime as well and play for us again. And I wanted to publicly give a shout out to Blue and his team, because I have had not only from board members complimenting Blue, but staff and community members, because in a short 4 months, he has accomplished a great deal around the district, and he has a list of additional things that need to be done. And along those lines, here in the next couple of days, I think we should be seeing a new sign for the Middleton Academy, because it has said Atlas up until now, and it's back to Middleton Academy. So that should be this week. And then finally, I wanted to just say thank you to Tim for your service to the Middleton School District. As we know, this is your last board meeting. You're still a board member through the January meeting, but thank you for your service.
Thank you.
All right.
Very good. Thank you. 5B, tax security update from Mr. Cazales.
Good evening. Where is everybody? So I'm gonna quick little projects here. It's going to give you an updates on the security in the district.
He's got one Duclos. That was amazing.
It's going to start over this meeting. So, since February, when we approved, the February 11th board meeting, we approved the security budgets. I wanted to kind of should tell you where we're at, and answer any questions you may have, and really kind of give some shout outs to some people that have really made this project happen. As of right now, we're about 95 to 90% complete, and I'll explain 95 to 97%. I'll explain what is remaining, which isn't a lot. And we are under budget from where you approved in February, which is great. And a lot of hard work to the team to really take on some of that work, and it's all then go to the vendors for that money. And we also push the vendors really hard by having them go out to bid to determine those figures a little more, so we can get a lot more for less. And so really going with that, I want to really put out some shout outs. Nick Davis, right here. So Nick, he has taken this project really from, it's been probably 2.5 years now that he's taken this project on with quotes, going through the schools. I can imagine how many walkthroughs he's done through the buildings to determine what is needed as far as security. How many times I've come up and talked to you about what we need as far as security. He's been really the person that's not only helped put it together, work with the vendors, but also support it, because it's now been in action since really September 11th is when we deployed the security full. So I really want to thank him big time. Michelle Matthews, really, she was helped with the budget. She's helped with making sure the meetings are on time and so forth, really helping me make that happen. Cody Robeson was another one. He's 21-year-old, I still call him a kid, 21-year-old kid, learning the ropes and so forth, really helped with security, helped pull wires, do things that really helped the project proceed. And then the vendors that really were behind this whole thing to help it happen, which is TechHut. TechHut's a big in the area as far as Techfinity, if anyone heard of Techfinity, they provide internet. But Techfinity also provides us our internet and our WAN, but they were huge, obviously, behind it. And then Global Technologies were behind the hardware as far as the doors, making sure they open and close, installing all the hardware that goes with all of it. So it was a huge job, especially with retrofitting everything we have in the district. It's not all the same. Thank you to the staff, Middleton staff. Obviously, they had to work within what we were doing, adapt the new badge system, adapt secretaries, huge thanks to the secretaries, because they had the new Raptor system, working with them, adapt that, how that all changes as visitors enter the building. So huge shout out to them, because it wasn't easy for them to adapt to this new change. Some highlights that I go through is we had 211 cameras. Basically, they were on independent called DVRs. So they did their own independent recording. We completely shifted that to 325 cameras district-wide that now operate basically in the cloud. And some of the good highlights are, if someone tries to, we've had it happen in schools where they try to mess with the cameras, and when they try to, it alerts us right away. And obviously we get an image of that. So it helps us, determine to make sure those cameras are up 24/7. Great reviews from the principals as far as being able to have that. First responders have access to that anytime they need to when it comes to that. So big when it comes to that, to make those cameras work 24/7. Other things that we have is now we have basically all our school vestibules. So everything you enter in the schools, the main spot, are all now secured. One point of entry when it comes to that. And we try to really push that one point of entry when it comes to visitors. If you'll notice, as they come into, visitors used to come into Annex A. They can't do that anymore. They got to push to come back to the main. We also allow for Annex A to have a little bit more flexibility for staff, so they can go check in, because a lot of trainings happen for professional development in Annex A. So it's really helped with that. And I've heard some great things in the community. Some people are like, thank you for the security that helps. Obviously, things are still happening out in this world that we need to make sure we're secure. As far as the doors themselves, we have 70 that we've converted over to electronic control, basically through the badge. There was a lot of retrofitting with those doors. They're not all the same. The hardware that had to go into those, the shading of some of the doors to make sure they close, especially when it comes to the portables. The portables all have badge readers, so it's really helps with their ability to stay secure out in the portables. But we've had to, on a weekly basis, we're having to fix doors. And we're working well with Blue and his maintenance department to help fix those. We've had to replace some doors. We've had instances where kids think they can kick the doors because they don't like them. New camera system catches the kids kicking the doors. Basically going to it, determined to help, the principals help us really try to train these students that's very important to keep you secure within the building during class time. But our goal is obviously 24/7 security, and the transition times we work really well with a lot of the community out there. Sometimes I've heard some feedback that, well, the doors are open. Why are they unlocked? Well, we have to have transition times. So there's that 7-minute transition time when they go out to the ag building or to MSD, Annex A from the main building. We have to have those doors open at that time. But the deal is that we have more manpower out there to watch those as they go from building to building versus just during the random day those doors would be unlocked and locked. Some students have badges to be able to get from the portables to the building to go to the restroom, so they can go from time to time. We've only had maybe 5 badges that have been lost so far in 3.5 months, which has been great. The badges that are being used, they've been effective. So I know a lot of teachers are like, thank you, I don't have to carry my keys. Now I can get in the building with big using these, which is more secure. That makes them wear these more often to identify themselves. So that's been great. The door position sensors, 150 of those total. So those are the sensors that go into the doors that if they're propped open, they alert the front office and administration that those doors are propped during the school day. That way they can get someone out there to close those doors. And it's not, it might not be just intentional, like we've had at the high school just today. We've had where they've had gravel in the door, just built up stuff that comes in that will allow those to close. So we have to clean it out to get them to close, but we have alerts to help us with those pieces. So it's been great. The Raptor visitor management system, I know they're using them. I know it's not been an easy to adapt, but we were working with them weekly, monthly to make it easy. I met with the secretaries about a month ago, sat with them to determine help them use it a little more effectively, answer any questions they may have. What we didn't want to do is to try to continue to do every school differently. And that's what becomes, because then the visitors look at it and say, well, this school is doing it different, this one, why can't we have this? We just a lot more training that we need to do to help them. But you'll see the statistics down there. High school, on average, 666, academy, about 27 visitors a day, or a month, 771 visitors at middle school, 833 at the Purple Sage. Heights is about close to 600. Mill Creek is almost 1,300 visitors a month. So you can tell that and really look at that data. That's some data that we started September 11th and that we ended, and then November, it's not as many days because of the Thanksgiving holidays. So, but it's being used and more with Fidelity to use those. So, and as far as the issues that come with them, at first a little bit more because they were trying to use the system, but we make sure it's a top priority that my techs are out there to help ensure we fix any kind of issues that have those. So things that we still have the horizon that we have to do. One thing I talked to you about in February and also back in July is that the intercom systems. The intercom systems were at the very end of the project because we could not get I came and it was almost when I was working with the last administration, it was close to $500,000 just to replace every intercom in this district. There's no way we could fund that. So what do we do as a plan B? Plan B was to try to retrofit what we had, replace speakers that maybe potentially not putting out the output that's needed to hear. And so we're doing that. We're starting at Mill Creek. We're going to continue on as we go through it. So hopefully that's where we're under budget. So we're allowed to at least get through some of these other schools to help with it, working with the chiefs of police and chief of fire. When they go through their drills, that's one thing they give me feedback on is where are the areas that they're not hearing the intercom. That's a big security issue that we're doing. So we're starting it again at Mill Creek and we're going through every school to help do that. That was the end of the project. And so my hope is to get those big areas, hallways, gyms, big music rooms. Because right now the nice part is the new phone system, they play the intercom over the phone system. So all the phones will play the same message from the principals, but that might not be loud enough in a large music room or a large choir room, or it won't be in a lunchroom because there's no phoners in the lunchroom. So we're going to improve those speakers. And then also the exterior speakers for the playground that can hear those announcements if we want to walk down or so forth. So that's the last part of the project that I'm pretty confident we can get through and improve that and finish out the project.
There it is.
It's a great job. Thanks,
sir.
Mike.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Next report will be our special education update by Ms. Watkins.
Good evening. Thanks for allowing us to present tonight. It's always a pleasure to present to you guys the successes of the things that we're doing to support students and staff. I wasn't as prepared as Mike, so you don't have a handout, but I'll still provide you some good information. So as Special Services Director, I oversee our nurses, our special ed department, and our counseling department. I'm going to kind of go through each department individually, and starting with our special ed department. Last year at the peak of our enrollment, we had about 420 special education students. Right now, we're sitting at 395, but there's some success in that. So since October, we have graduated 17 students out of special education, and they've met all their goals, and they are now operating in the general education program. And I think that's a huge success that we should celebrate. Some of them were speech only, but still they graduated, they met their goals, and that's awesome. And although our current numbers are down a bit, the level of behaviors we're seeing are drastically different than we saw 10 years ago and 15 years ago. And we're trying to figure out how to deal with those on a daily basis, especially not being able to prepare for what is being sent to us, what kind of what students we're getting and the services they need. It's always easier if you have that foresight and you're able to staff accordingly and whatnot, but when you're not, I am blessed to have such an incredible staff that just jumps in, they do what's best for kids immediately, and then we do what we need to do to make sure that we are as staffed as we possibly can be. Speaking of staffing, right now we have 18 certified staff members, so those are our teachers of our special education students. We're currently down one right now at the middle school for long-term medical leave, but we do anticipate hiring that position full-time come January as a certified position to make sure that we have a case manager for those students who can support them and take care of their individualized goals. We have one certified school psychologist. We should have two for a caseload of 400. To say that's a bit much is an understatement, but that job has been posted since end of September, beginning of October, and I checked again today and we have 0 applicants. So because of that, we have contracted with a school psychologist from West Ada to do some of our report writing. So our school psychologist will go in, she'll do the observations, she'll do the testing, she'll email that information off to our contracting person, who then will spend the time at home to write the reports and take some of that workload off of her. Additionally, we're looking at having staff members and or administrators do some of those classroom observation times, because anyone can do the classroom observation to help alleviate some of the workload that she is facing. The bonus for all of us is we have the best school psych, and she has an amazing personality. She's very even-keeled. She advocates for herself. So when she gets into a level of, this is too much on my plate, we come together as a team and we figure out what we can do to support her, knowing that statewide right now, school psychologists are very, very difficult to fill. And the only school outputting them is Idaho State, and they're just not staying in Idaho based on pay and opportunity. So we'll continue to advertise that. I'll continue to seek out different opportunities for us. I do anticipate that come spring, when jobs start turning over, we will be able to fill that position. We have a good salary schedule for our school psychs that's very competitive to surrounding districts. And so I hope that once people are out of their contracts or able to negotiate into a new contract, we're able to fill that and we will be fully staffed in that capacity next year. We have 2 speech language pathologists and 2 speech language pathologist aides, and then we contract 1 speech language pathologist. We have 1 occupational therapist, and we contract 2 occupational therapists. We have approximately 40 classified staff, and within their job duties, they're either one-to-one support for students. They take care of students' personal care needs. Their BI, behavior intervention support, their general education support. So they're pushing out into the general education classroom to support our special ed students while they're in there, and also the general education teacher. We have resource room support for our students who are in the resource room, and then we have extended resource room and preschool support as well. So those jobs are absolutely invaluable. Unfortunately, at any given time, the reality is that we always have openings, just based on a little bit, we have to be honest, based on pay, based on other opportunities. It's like one of our most needed positions within our district, but one of the hardest to fill. And that's something I think, every school district's facing, and one that we need to continually look at of how to support our professional educators and give them a living wage also moving forward. One of the great things that we have is we have a contract with Life Counseling Services out of CUNA and Caldwell. And they provide our CBRS services, which is our community-based rehabilitation services for any student who has some severe behavior issues. They come in and they provide that one-to-one support. It's Medicaid billable. And so it isn't a huge cost to the district. And it provides our students what they need without having to pay benefits and insurance and all of those pieces. I'm really excited. Today was our first meeting at the middle school, and Diana's here, but I have contracted with SESTA. So as I said, our behaviors are growing drastically, and I don't want to say that we don't know what to do with them, but sometimes it's really difficult when you don't know what kind of behaviors you're going to get, and you expect that the student is going to be able to perform in a general education or a special education environment. So SESTA is our, it stands for Special Education Support and Technology Assistance. And it's an organization that is state funded. So our State Department of Education, with input from BSU and help from BSU, has put together this team of the most knowledgeable special education people in our field to help support each of our districts. There's 3 behavior intervention specialists in the state of Idaho. And today we were able to bring in our representative along with her supervisor to begin what I hope to be a system-wide audit of our district and of our current behavior supports. If we want to talk about having a behavior intervention classroom, I want to make sure that we do so with the best and the most detailed information as we possibly can with outside sets of eyes. Because I can say we're doing X, Y, and Z, and our staff can say we're doing X, Y, and Z, but I want somebody who doesn't have any heart and soul into the programs we're doing to come in and say, this is what you're doing great. This is what you need to work on. These are some things that we can do to support kids now. If you were to have a behavior program, here's the criteria to get in, here's the criteria to exit. Here's who should be teaching it. Here's what curriculum you should be using. All of those different pieces. So I want to make sure if we move to that, we do so with thought and purpose and really solid decision making. So I'm excited. This is a year-long opportunity to contract with SESTA. It costs us nothing, which is really exciting. And they come in and they do a full analysis and audit. And we're starting with the middle school in our behavior program with some of our behavior students there that we're currently struggling with. And the team. So that's really exciting for me. Our counselors oversee all of our 504 services as well. And currently we have 10 school counselors and 1 college and career counselor. But out of those 10, 6 are new to us this year and 2 are in new roles within the district. So it really is a very new, very fresh staff. And they're eager to learn, they're eager to work with each other and work to provide that cohesiveness in that team. Our elementary is working more closely than they ever have before. So at the elementary schools, I don't know if I have any elementary principals here, but they do character traits every month. Every elementary is doing the same character traits, the same lesson, focusing on the same curriculum, and that's really exciting. And then as we move to the middle and the high school is working really, really closely with some of the grants and opportunities that they've received to provide some great leadership roles for our students to become that peer mentor piece, and the positive behavior piece is a huge part of our counseling services. Also, if I go back to life counseling, so one of the things that we're seeing, I think, across the nation, but most specifically in Idaho, is a lack of resources around trauma and mental health. There's not a lot of opportunities for our families when it comes to mental health services. So with my contracting with life counseling for our CBRS, Jeff, who is the manager owner of life counseling, came to me and said, you know, in Caldwell for the last couple of years, we've been going into the schools and we've been offering severe clinical counseling, mild clinical counseling, moderate clinical counseling to identified students, and it's free to your district. I was like, yeah, right. Like, how does this work, right? So our counselors, so we're just starting to implement it at the high school, then we'll move to the middle school, then we'll move to the elementary schools. So our counselors identify the students who may be in need of clinical counseling and they're not able to get it. One of the things that we're seeing is, being in Middleton, our families aren't able to drive to Boise. They're not able to drive to Meridian to get some of those really necessarily counseling services, but additionally, they don't maybe have the gas money to do so. So life counseling comes in and they rent a space from us. They pay us a certain dollar amount so that it's legit and upfront, and we provide that space. Then once a week or 5 days a week, based on our need and what we do, they come in, they work with our counselors. So the only work on our counselors end is to get the release signed for the students to have counseling services. So then life counseling comes in, they contact the parents, they set it all up, they get all of the insurance or Medicaid information, they come in, they provide the counseling to the student. It's very few missed hours of school because it's provided right here. So if they come in 3rd period this week, they'll come in 4th period next week, 5th period the next week. So the student is no longer missing 7th period every single day to drive to Boise. They bill all of the insurance pieces. We reap the benefits of hosting offices for them. But our kids, the benefits for our students, for me, is huge, because our counselors are fabulous and wonderful, but there's this fine line with the ethics and counseling on clinical counseling services within the school. So they can provide a much more in-depth counseling. And then if needed, say we have a threat assessment or we're worried about a student for a 504 for some mental health illness, they can become part of our team through that release process to help us make the best decisions for our kids. And I'm really excited to get that going K-12, because we see even at the 1st grade level, we have a lot of students who could really benefit from mental health counseling and are excited to implement that. In our nursing department, we have a 2.2 FTE. That is 1 full-time nurse, 1 full-time nurse medical assistant, and 2 part-time nurses, a 0.8 and a 0.4. So what that gives is basically nursing service at each school at least 2.5 days a week, as we bounce them around and move them around. So far this year, we have seen scabies, lice, fleas. Today at Mill Creek, we sent home an influenza letter because we have 2 diagnosed cases of influenza. But what I love is that our nurses are so dedicated to their students and the profession that they've worked to align all of our procedures, which we have not had in the past, to CDC guidelines. And I sent this to you guys in your Friday update, but I just wanted to hit on it here again. Because today, as soon as I saw Jess's email, I was able to contact her and say, hey, do you have the parent letter for influenza? Have you sent it home? Do you have the tips to avoid continual contact? Can we send that home too? We haven't had that in the past. And so we have very specific guidelines outlined now based on CDC Those will be uploaded to the website soon so that all of our stakeholders have access to them. And I think it's us doing our due diligence to make sure that our staff and our students are as healthy and well while they're at school as possible, and not spreading those crazy germs that come around this time of year. I would advocate that, as we continue to grow and our health needs continue to grow, we do need to look at school nursing and how that can be staffed within our confines of our budget. I think MAs are a great opportunity for us. They're medical assistants. We have 2 full-time RNs who can oversee that, and they do not cost us as much, but they're able to do all of the things that we're currently doing. And then last year, partnering with Dr. McConkey to be our EpiPen provider has been great. We do have some pretty severe needs in our district, and I've had to call for ambulance service multiple times this year. And we just want to make sure that when that happens, that our students are in the best care as possible, even if a nurse isn't available. So we're providing training as needed to administration and office staff so that they know what needs to happen in those cases. Challenges. I mean, my challenges aren't any different than I think any other district. Staffing, the school psych. We weren't able ever to find a solid candidate for a consulting teacher position last year, so we put that on the back burner, but it's definitely still a need within our department. And then paraprofessionals. It's just so hard finding somebody that wants to do that job day in and day out. Nursing needs versus nursing bodies. Funding, that's not on you guys, that's on the federal government, right? We're looking at additional cuts probably this year based on what I'm seeing. Retention in SPED is probably one of the hardest things. If you can keep a SPED teacher 2 to 3 years, you're really, really winning. But at the same time, you have to understand that most of those special education teachers are coming out of alternative programs like ABCTE or something similar, and aren't coming through the traditional college program. So there is a gap in pedagogy and some of those pieces that we need to work on our end to make sure that they still have to support students. And then obligated, we're obligated to service the students that we get, regardless of funding, regardless of what we have in place. And we don't always anticipate, we can't anticipate what needs our students are gonna have, but we do a really fabulous job, and I appreciate our district office. When I call, I know that sometimes some of them don't want to answer the phone because they're like, oh no, that's another FTE, that's another this. But then I also want to give, I think, the biggest shout out to Mike and Lisa, and you guys, because with your help and their help, I've been in this district for 20 years, and this is the first time that preschool to our 21-year-old special ed students have curriculum. They have great curriculum. They have standards-based curriculum, and they are feeling so incredibly supported to be a part of that process and be able to support their students through quality curriculum. So thank you guys for that. And now I can take a breath. Do you have any questions?
So obviously we hear the struggle for having people on staff. How do we compare with our neighbors? Are we in the same boat? Are we?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. School psychs down across the board. In fact, and I really don't want to do this, and that's kind of why I'm hanging on and trying to grasp every option I possibly can. But a lot of our surrounding districts, especially the small ones, even smaller than us, they're turning to telephone service school psychologists. So they do it via web, they do it via Skype. And I just can't see that being best practice for our staff, our departments, our kids. So I've scraped up the resources I could to get through this year to try not to turn to a program like that, but it's becoming pretty prevalent in that, you can phone a school psych. I I just can't wrap myself around that yet. And hopefully, Kirk, we don't have to get there. But paraprofessionals, the same way, across the board. Here's the dilemma. You have Amazon coming in, paying $15 an hour. You have Chick-fil-A starting at $12.30 an hour. And our paras, aren't paid that much. So it's difficult. Most of our paraprofessionals, I would say, work for insurance. So literally they are coming to us so that their family or themselves have the insurance that they need to be able to survive. But it's across the board, the same way, yes. It's a struggle. Special education in general is a struggle. College of Idaho is in the process right now of implementing, I think, again, a special education program so that they can start graduating SPED students again, but it's at a master level. So I don't know how much that's going to benefit us.
You say your day, you have an increase of incidences and things you have to react to. Generally, what percentage of your day is fixed, like with a plan? And then what's the percentage of our day that we react? Is that? And I guess another thing, maybe for some of the students in the room tonight, when you say special education, what does that net encompass?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's great. So special education is for students who typically fall at least 2 grade levels or below in their academic services. Additionally, it could be a student who has health impairments, who has autism, ADHD, a lot of different diagnoses, and they just struggle academically in school, or they struggle with the traditional education environment. And then when you add some of the behavior pieces that we're seeing, so we're having, I think the reality that we're seeing right now is we're getting an influx of babies that were born addicted to methamphetamine. And so we're seeing a huge, we don't even know what's necessarily going on in their brains. When you use meth, the neurons are fried in the parent. So what's happening to the baby that's in the womb? And then when they come out, how is that going to translate into different behaviors? A lot of reactive attachment disorder. So students who are in foster care or have been adopted, and they have that need to be attached to that stability factor. So reactive versus plan. I would like to say that when we react, we reflect and come back as a team to develop a plan. That plan may or may not work for a honeymoon period, a day, a minute, a week. So then we come back to the drawing table to get again today. When we met with the middle school today about one of our behavior students, it was a solid 2-hour meeting with 6 people. And we literally were diving in depth about every 25 to 30 minutes of the day. What does that first 30 minutes look like? What does the next 30 minutes look like? When the behaviors increase, what do you see? What do you get? And I think the reality is that Mill Creek and Heights are seeing some of these behaviors and they've never seen them before. Most of our behaviors have been at Purple Sage, and then they transfer into the middle school and the high school. But as our community grows and housing changes and things change, Heights and Mill Creek both have some pretty severe behavior issues. So what I've done to help them is I've taken some of our trained behavior interventionists from the high school, and I've gotten them a sub, and I've had them go shadow workers at those 2 schools just to try to provide that extra layer of support. So I wish I could give you a better answer, but I would say that while we're being reactionary to keep students and staff safe, in the back of our minds, we're always planning and we're always thinking. I don't know that that's the best answer, I'm sorry.
Appreciate it.
Other questions?
How are you, dealing with these students that have behavioral issues and traumas? That can relate to teachers and carry over. What are we doing for the mental stability of our teachers and the staff that are working with them, and how are you monitoring or helping them adjust?
That's such a great question. So Kristen sent out, I don't even know what it's called, but the access for staff to counseling services that we have through our insurance. And then district-wide, we're working with PBIS, which you guys know, and we were able to go to an amazing conference at Boise State with PBIS, and they're coming back again in the spring. But through that, I found some companies that offer secondary trauma training, and so that's for staff members. So the initial trauma is the students, right? But then the secondary trauma training is for those staff who deal with trauma all day, every day, and then they have to go home and function in their own confines. So we're working on bringing secondary trauma training at the earliest, probably would be next year, to our staff as a whole, especially our SPED staff and our extended resource and behavior staff. I think they're kind of some of our biggest ones. But I think as a teacher, 20 years, I can look back and I can think of a lot of moments of trauma that I had just knowing what some of my students went through and trying to help them day in and day out, and then going home and not sleeping because it's in my brain all night long processing what a 12-year-old is facing at home. So I think that, with my conversations with Lisa and with Sharon and Kristen moving forward is when we talk trauma, we have to look at the initial trauma, but then we also have to bring in that secondary trauma piece. And this was our initial year focusing on trauma for staff. And I think we've done a good job. I think Mill Creek just brought in another presenter on trauma. We're going to continue to bring in those pieces and those parts and pull that in through the PBIS as well. But then now our next step is to address that secondary trauma and making sure our staff is healthy. I do give, just so you know, our SPED staff does get 1 day a month out of the classroom to just work on paperwork, kind of some of those bigger issue pieces that they have that general ed staff doesn't have. I try to do my best to take some things off their plate and give them time because they are so valuable. It's a really good question.
So when you said that paperwork, that brought to mind, how are we doing with filing? Better than we did? Are we caught up as to filing and how it should be with the state in the correct way?
Yeah,
Or
so-
are we behind on that still?
Well, we're getting, okay,
Better.
so
Two-part question.
I know, look, I'm burying my head right now. So we were rocking it last year. We really had moved mountains based from when I walked into the position and we got in trouble, right, with the state to where we were at the beginning of the year. But then turnover came. And so now it's like you get all that momentum and then you slide right back. And so right now, Amber, who is one of my administrative assistants, is doing most of the file reviews, and it's a full-time job. It really is, just getting our files up to par. We just submitted our files last week to the state, and I do think we submitted 3 really good files. But this is the last year we get to choose our files. So next year, the state's gonna come in, and fingers crossed, I'm gonna do it right now, fingers crossed, we had 3 perfect files this year. If that's the case, then they're only gonna ask for 1 high school file next year. And they pick it. So those are okay odds, right? But it's just it's a continual process of training and time with staff. Here's the biggest issue. I don't want to pull special education staff out of the building, because if you pull all SPED in 1 day, your buildings are done. And then when we have a lot of our in-service pieces, I want them with the general ed staff talking about data, talking about curriculum. So it's that fine line of finding when I can pull them that doesn't impact the system.
So it's not something they can do like a teacher does, go home and grade papers. They can't go, do they go home and file? I mean, is that something?
So they don't file necessarily. They go home and they create their files.
Gotcha.
So they go home and they input all the information that's required into a student's IEP file. But that's where a lot of the hiccups, and then in all honesty, you get it down and the state changes it. So it's a revolving door, but do I think we're doing better? Yes. Do I think we're being more harsh on them than the state would? Because I want to do what's compliant plus best practice? Yeah, but we'll get them. They're open.
Thanks, Charlene.
Last question, Sharon, or you, really, the CDC guidelines, are those obviously Center for Disease Control guidelines, are those accepted by the state? Are they accepted by our district? Where are they as in policy and procedure?
So,
Well, so that's a great question. So, our nursing policies aren't the strongest. And our procedures have varied in the past to where they have been we've typically tried to follow the CDC guidelines, but where the teeth lie is where we fell apart. So for instance, immunizations. In the past, we would send home a first immunization letter, your child's not immunized. We do that in kindergarten, first grade, right? We'd send home a second letter. We'd send home a third letter, nothing happened. So for most of my time being here, you would get 3 letters, but then there was no recourse. So the next year, you would get 3 letters. Well, now we're really working to follow some of our policies, especially like with immunizations. And so, if you can't get us what we need by step 3, we're gonna unenroll your child. We're getting things done because we're actually following the policy. With CDC, I think IDAPA code has something, and I'm not 100% positive, and I can look it up for you, but I think there's something with state and IDAPA code that we need to be as careful or conservative as possible to keep our students and our staff safe and healthy. So that's where we've just gone to the CDC and aligned. I can I give the history? I was gonna bring those all to you, but it's
hundreds and hundreds.
Hundreds and hundreds of pages. And then we were like, well, it's not policy, so it's not really need to be board approved. And like I said, the one I'm most concerned about is with our vaccination rates being as low as they are. If measles were to occur, we have a lot of students who would have to be out of school for 21 days.
And let's just clarify too, that students who are not vaccinated, if they don't get vaccinations, they can provide an exemption
Yes.
as to
Yeah,
one.
so
But even with that exemption paper, they're out of school
Yeah.
for 21 days.
Because it's
So we'll accept-
them as well.
so we'll accept an exemption.
Yep.
That's still
So it's-
state law, but like Mike's done a great job making sure our security's at our front door, getting in. This is our security inside the school. So then if somebody contracted measles, then whoever is not immunized would be out of school for 21 days?
Yeah,
Yes.
from the time that the students last was at the school. So the measles contractor, from the day that they were last at the school, every staff member and student who is not immunized is out for 21 days because that's the incubation period. And we do know who those students are. We have we just in October sent third letter reminders home, and I do not believe we've had to unenroll anyone. We've either gotten the immunizations done or we got the exemption, and the exemption can be based on medical need, like your child just can't be exempt, or religion or choice. And it's a pretty easy form to fill out. We started sending it home with the letters to make it more accessible to families. But at the end of the day, it doesn't increase our vaccination levels, which are very low. So that's my only fear. And I know that it would come to you guys at that point.
But Kirk, to answer your question, we can find out IDAPA code and make sure that
Absolutely.
we.
Yeah, IDAPA code with measles it does follow the 21-day period. Yeah.
I just think we should have that out.
Mhm.
Make sure everybody's aware of the situation, so at least we know. what would be the next step?
And as we update our website, I can outline our immunization protocol very clearly so that families can go straight to like just immunization, step 1, step 2, step 3, what we do and what's all required. And then I can go a separate way into procedures for each individual case, if that, I think, would make it more clear for everybody.
Yeah, I just think if we could do some of that paperwork, some of that education beforehand, immunization piece, that could be a personal, that could be that's its own separate thing, but our response shouldn't be. Our response should be very well documented. So if we have something, we know what our response is. That piece is a personal choice, I get that, but our response should be very well documented, I think, and shared.
Yep. And in my next Friday, I'll send you the letter 1, 2, and 3 that we send out so you can see them, as well as what the exemption form looks like. My board report for Friday is done.
I want to ask
Anything
you more questions. I want to ask you
No,
more
you're good. I appreciate it.
questions. Oh, shut up.
How's our transportation working with our sped?
It's good. It's good. I mean, we have some kids on the bus for a really long time. I got middle schoolers on the bus for an hour and 15 minutes one way. But the reality is, when you only have so many sped buses, right, and you live out in Sand Hollow, do our best we can to minimize. But I will say that AJ and Gina I'm looking at Amber. AJ and Gina have been fabulous to work with, and the level of support that they provide us is far superior to what we've had. So it's been a nice transition. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Always.
Thank you. All right. Our next report will be curriculum assessment PD update by Lisa Penn. Lisa?
How is everybody? I just wanted to give a quick update and really talk about some of the big things that are on our docket. And so probably the biggest thing is our curriculum adoption for this year. And so we've started meeting with teachers. We met with them a few times this semester and really started doing some standards work behind all the curriculum documents we'll create once we adopt a resource. And so we've also asked them in that time to kind of create their golf balls, what their big ideas are that they really need during this curriculum adoption. And we have that down to a really good idea around lab materials, science materials. And so that's been one of the biggest things that has come out of our conversation so far. Is it's not necessarily the textbook or those pieces, but what about all the materials to be able to implement what the standards are asking us to implement? And so we've done a lot of that pre-work. And then we've also, Cheryl, Dr. Reberry, and myself have sat and talked a lot about budget and really looked at the budget and figured out what seems reasonable for us to move forward with this adoption. Our last 3 adoptions have been somewhere between $500,000 and $600,000. And so that's really kind of our ballpark when you think about where we need to be sitting going into the adoption. And so with that being said, I've reached out and I'm starting to work with vendors to determine our best pilot options, what we have to look at this year to try to test some things out and possibly into next year, as well as ways that they could invoice us so we could possibly look at 2 fiscal years or how we can make the budget work to the best of our ability. And so that's been one of the big things that we've had conversations about lately. We've also worked pretty strategically as far as working with teachers and figuring out how do we put and form our committee and then who we would like to invite to be on that. And so I'm going to be reaching out to community members, parents, people that teachers have recommended to me that would be a good fit for that committee and really start that committee work starting after the holiday break. And so that's kind of our timeline where we're at. We're hoping then at that point, once we start that committee work, that we can bring something to the board in April, possibly May. We like the April timeline just because it allows us to get resources and all the stuff to our staff prior to the end of the year, get some training under our belt, so then no surprises starting next August where we're at with that new adoption. And so that's kind of our timeline as far as the adoption goes and where we're at there. With assessments, we're kind of in our second testing window of the year with our big assessment. So we're just about wrapping up our K-5 diagnostic tests. So this would be our second testing window with our K-5 students. We plan on then meeting Dr. Reberry and myself with those principals next week to really look at that data and determine our next steps moving forward in the spring for what we want those actionable items to be to close the year out. And then with secondary, that their testing window is right after the holiday break, so more in January. And so we'll do that same protocol with them and probably meet with them that fourth week of January to make their next steps for the spring semester. And so those are kind of our big things. We did receive our fall reading scores, our IRI scores. No surprises there. It's really kind of that baseline assessment for us. And so we'll be looking, we do a monthly test with the same test, and then we'll do this winter assessment this December, and that's something that we'll have conversations with the principals about next week. So that's really how we're progress monitoring and watching our reading assessment data, and that's mainly K-3. And so we do assess for 8 and even up to high school in reading, but that K-3 is what the state is looking at for accountability. So that's where we're at with assessments. Professional development, we have a ton going on. We're doing a lot of peer-to-peer observations with the instructional specialists. We've pretty much done those at almost all of our buildings so far this year and had multiple days at all of those buildings for the most part. We also have our positive behavior training going on, and so we start our 3rd day where they're coming in and training us as a district on Tier 1. And so tomorrow will be our 3rd day on that. We have a 4th day this spring, and then that will kind of conclude our 4-day stint of the Tier 1 training this year. We've also continued our work with the ELA adoption, and all of our ELA materials are formative assessments, and continue to do that training, if not during those Wednesday collaboration times, but during our professional development days where we pull teachers out. And so we do offer 2 days with every grade level in district to pair with instructional specialists, myself, to develop a day of training of what they think is their biggest needs and how we can support them. And so that grade level works together to develop that day, and then we just support their needs that way. And so we've done that with quite a few grade levels so far, and we have grade levels scheduled 3 or 4 more before Christmas break, and then quite a few after. So we also, the Southern Idaho Conference does the direct writing assessment, and we've done that for the last 5 years. This year, we've started the direct math assessment as well. And so districts that have kind of one person in my role, we've paired off from the bigger districts, and we focus on the direct math. However, as a district, we chose to keep that direct writing at the forefront. And so we actually provided 1 full day last week where we brought all 5th grade teachers together, and we did an internal direct writing assessment, calibration, grading, professional development. And so it was very powerful. It's the first time we've done it as a district, and we've received great feedback as far as that goes. And so it really keeps the momentum for us going, so we don't have a skipped year with that. And so our 5th graders, our 5th grade teachers continue to just keep that momentum going with writing, which has been awesome. So we also had some 3rd grade, 4th grade, middle school librarian, thank you, Diana, help us come together and grade those assessments. So it was a good collaborative effort. And then finally, our direct math assessment, we had that training today. So all of our 6th, 7th grade teachers, instructional specialists, myself, went to Boise, collaborated with the Southern Idaho Conference around math, 7th grade math performance tasks, and had great conversations around the standard. It was very powerful, actionable data that teachers, as they were leaving today, had conversations about what can I go do tomorrow in my classroom to really focus on what I learned from my student work here today. And so that's been exciting, and we'll meet with them again this Wednesday to talk about maybe what their next steps are and where we see this going. And then we have another day this spring with the Southern Idaho Conference for our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade teachers at that point. So that's where our math focus has been lately, but that's kind of just the overarching big things that are happening right now. But there's always a lot going on, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys might have.
I have
Yeah.
one, Lise. So when you talk about $500,000 to $600,000 on adoption, is that what, wouldn't one be more than, I mean, would you need more for science than you would for math, or is it pretty much a baseline about the same?
It's been interesting. So when we started the process with math, it was really about 660,000, so a little over 600. When we did social studies, we were down in the 400,000s. And that's because really in the scope of these adoptions, sometimes it's K-12 and it's everybody, sometimes it's K-5. So it's really depending on how many teacher students that we're adopting for. When we did ELA last year, we were closer to 700,000. And so that's where, and then when I talk to districts around us who have adopted science and we've talked through those pieces, really I think $500,000 is gonna be a good spot for us to start. And when it comes to science, it is the tricky part because it is the resources and what they need to do, the labs, and really what our policies identify as curriculum that we can purchase during an adoption, because our policies are pretty clear too about what is curriculum. And so sometimes the things we might think we're buying, we can't buy because of how our policies are outlined. And so we follow that very closely, but what we have to remember, and the thing with science that I think is gonna get trickier, and this is the first time we've done science in I can't tell you how many years, is when we look at those resources and what they need for those labs, we're talking 6 years. So we're trying to partner with companies and figure out how do we adopt and ensure whatever labs that we're gonna do, we have enough resources for 6 years so they can send us kind of a continuing contract, right?
Mhm.
So we'll pay for it all up front, but then every 6 years, they're gonna send us those consumables so we have what we need. And so we're really being very strategic as we narrow down the search of who we're gonna partner with as far as those resources go, and partnering with companies that provide that service. Because otherwise, we don't have a balance to carry forward and buy every year. So we really need that 6 years up front.
Excellent. Okay, one other question I had for you. For that K-3, is it IRI?
Uh-huh.
Or how did we, from this fall compared to last fall? I mean, obviously, I'm sure you're collecting that data, but how is that comparing?
Very similarly, where the wild card always is kindergarten. And that's because you don't know how a kindergartner is gonna come in, right? And then, especially with that first assessment, they're coming in and they're using technology, so we're asking them to use a computer to take an assessment. And so when you do that with kindergartners, there you go.
I can't imagine what my kindergartner would be doing. He wouldn't have okay.
So in early September, right, the first week of September, there's just a lot of variables that go along with that. And even with first graders in September, that first week of school. And so that's really where we see the variance. Pretty pleased when we look at our second and third grade, we can usually forecast that from the spring before, how we think they're gonna test. And we usually see a little bit of a drop just due to that summer piece. But it's great data for us to be able to say we have room to improve. And doing those monthly tests, that's really what we're gonna narrow in on next week when we talk to those administrators, is what are you seeing in your monthly tests? And then what variables are playing into that. And so we're in a good spot where we have a lot of data to talk about and make a good game plan as far as our actions moving forward. The fall data is always interesting because it's that start of the year, which is really just a good baseline for us. It's our winter and our spring that really help determine what we're doing to improve those.
For just the realm of it, how are the kindergartners that were full-time last year to first grade? Are you separating that kind of data? How is that? We're seeing a major difference?
Yeah, between our half day and our full day. We are, but we have to remember they're getting twice as many instructional hours. So you should see a difference. And so we are looking at that data both ways, and I'd be happy to present that to you guys as well.
No, I'd just be interested.
But maybe I'll add it to my board report. But yeah, we're definitely looking at it that way because especially as the state looks to fund more with the literacy money, and if that looks like all day kindergarten for everybody, then what data do we have to support that as a district as well? And so it's been good that we've had those 2 classes of full day, those 2 teachers, so we actually have some data to look at because there's districts that didn't have that data, and so we definitely are capitalizing on that.
Excellent. Well, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. Questions?
You're safe.
Okay. Always happy to answer.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks, Lisa.
Okay, moving out of reports into our action items, item 6A, CTE science curriculum approval.
Yeah, so a little bit of history here. There's been a shift at the state level as far as the science standards go. And so prior to these standards, we had very content-based standards with science. And so we had a pretty easy correlation as far as our ag classes. Maybe it's vet science, some of the horticulture classes aligning with those standards. And so it was easy to offer an applied science credit for students taking an ag class. With the shift in standards, there are 3-dimensional standards. So there's the content, there's the science and engineering practices, and then cross-cutting concepts. And so we reached out to the state and said, if we want to continue to offer these courses for applied science credit, so a student could take an ag course and get a science credit, not an elective credit, what work would we need to do to ensure that we're aligned and that we would be able to solidify in the transcript they met the requirements they needed to meet, whether it's a certified teacher, whether it's standards, whatever that looks like. So we did all that work, talked with the state, and then pretty much what we came down to within state code and with what we had is that we have to provide a certified teacher that has the right credential. Lucky for us, all of our ag teachers have a natural science endorsement. And then we also need to show a document that aligns to the new standards. And so how are we gonna meet that 3 dimensions of those new standards within these courses to offer that applied science credit. So with that being said, we brought in our ag teachers for professional development. They helped us create the document that you guys see in your packet. We kind of brainstormed, what does this look like? What's the best way to do it? They liked the checklist idea. So we took those science and engineering practices, those cross-cutting concepts, their standards are on the left-hand side of that document. And they said, when I teach this standard in ag, here's the things I'm needing that align to the science standards. And so they were able to do that work. And kind of the last piece of the puzzle for us, we have the credentials that the teachers have. We have this document is for you guys to approve as a local education organization that we are able to do this. And so if you guys are willing to vote on that and solidify that, then we can offer those ag classes for applied science credit. And then students have kind of a different route to earn science credit that's not just within the science department, but also within the ag department.
So that document was done between you and the ag
Yes.
teachers?
Yeah.
A lot of work.
It was a lot of work.
Yeah.
And it was kind of interesting because I think we met multiple times and I said, here's what I'm thinking, here's how we're gonna try to make this as easy of a load on you guys as possible, but this is really what the state would like to see. And so then we brainstormed with the state science coordinator and said, here's what we're thinking. Can you come into our training and talk to these guys and Emily and work through this with us? So they came into our training, and it was funny because the ag organizations at the state they're pretty much just saying at this point, we're not gonna allow this because of the amount of work it takes to get there, right? So a lot of districts around us aren't to this point yet. So we're kind of ahead of the curve as far as being able to get this document done and offer this on top of having the correctly credentialed teachers to do it. And then, so the science people came into the meeting, they saw what we were doing, they were thrilled with it, got their stamp of approval. They really liked the document we came up with. And so it's been a good collaborative effort. It wouldn't surprise me if other districts around us now start asking for this in that collaborative nature.
Yeah,
So they
that's
can
cool.
continue to do that work as well. Yeah,
That's
we actually
awesome.
found out one district around us thought they did the work and they aligned to the old standards. And so when they figured that out, so we even there was 2 teachers that were from other districts that came in to help us with this work as well, some of the
Cool.
smaller districts around us, so. Yeah, it was good.
It's awesome.
And the best part is our ag teachers at the end of the day said this wasn't as bad as we thought it was gonna be, so, yeah.
Wow.
So Tim, I move that we accept the CTE science curriculum.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Approved.
Thank you,
All
I'm
right.
very excited for that, I appreciate it.
Thank you. And we will not be having executive session tonight. The next item on our agenda is the hearing of signed-in visitors.
Nope.
No? All right. At this point, I will invite the high school students to come forward. We can sign your papers.
Any of us can sign you this.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. Thanks for coming.
Sorry about that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
How are you? Great.
Good.
Thank you.
Hello. How are you?
Good.
You're welcome. I'll see you later.
All right, with that being done, I would ask for the next adjournment, a motion to adjourn.
A motion to adjourn?
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So moved. We are adjourned.
Check, check.